So in the beginning, people were pretty amazed that you could buy an airline ticket online, and then hotels. But everyone knows that the trip is much more than just an air flight and a hotel stay. So we're going to talk about things beyond beds and air on this discussion. So I'd like to introduce our panelists tonight. We have Bobby Healy, the CTO of CarTrawler. LP Maurice, co-founder and CEO of Busbud. Will Philipson, co-founder and president of SilverRail Technologies. And Polina Raygorodskaya, CEO of Wanderu. Okay. So let's just start with just a little introductions on what you do, what your company's about, in case people are not familiar with you. So why don't you go ahead and start?
So I'm CTO of CarTrawler, and we power all forms of ground transportation for primarily airlines, but OTAs as well. We're a B2B business.
Okay.
So we're an OTA for bus travel. So Busbud is in 60 countries. So if you want to buy a bus ticket here, anywhere you're traveling in the world, you can do it on Busbud.
Okay.
We provide technology to enable access to rail content.
Okay.
Wanderu is a leading ground travel search in North America, so we serve millions of users, help them figure out how to get from point A to point B using non-air transportation currently, but really focus on the multimodal end.
So multimodal seems to have become a real popular term that has been embraced in all different markets. But how important is it for whether you're doing a B2B play or whether you're going to a B2C to have this all-inclusive idea of having bus transfers, rail? Is there actually demand for people to have those additional services online? How have you kind of verified that that's the case? I mean, we know car rental, but how about these other services?
Rail and I can talk to that.
Sure.
So for us, our focus has always been helping people figure out how to get from point A to point B, right? So on Wanderu, you can type in any address, city, point of interest. We find the closest station from where you're traveling from and where you're going to. And we also route providers together. So we have our own routing technology that can combine a bus and a train or two buses. And we create one itinerary for the customer. They fill out their information once, and in seconds, they get reservations from all the different modes of transport that they're traveling on.
Okay.
We find that this is about 30% of our bookings on average for our partners. So that means that for about 30% of our bookings, our partners would not be able to sell those tickets otherwise. So it's definitely, for our partners, we've increased the market significantly and allowed them to connect to our network. We have over 75 million routes in our system. So it allows them to connect to any of those 75 million routes.
So you feel that the demand is there, just was unfulfilled, and does that mean there were actually buses that were empty that we now have seats filled? Is it
if they were empty, they wouldn't be running them, but there's certainly there's still seats that need to be filled, and there's always an opportunity to fill more seats and run more routes.
Yeah, so LP, let me ask you that one. So since you've been in business and do all these the bus sales, have the bus carriers come back to you and said it's increased our load factor by X, and do you have something measurable out there?
Yeah, that's actually our value proposition, is we help them fill their seats and basically bring new audiences. So it could be international travelers in our case, which are very hard to reach for bus operators. So they're operating their buses, they're maybe doing some local advertising, local marketing, but our site's translating 11 languages, we support 30 currencies. So we go back to the bus companies and say, look at these emails that we're sending you, and like the majority of the emails that were of the customers that we're sending them, they've never seen before. So we're actually increasing with the kind of new type of user that they're not usually seeing.
Yeah, I mean, we see it differently being a B2B operator.
Yes.
The reasons that we would do it are different than the reasons that B2C guys would do it. So for us, it's about increasing the relevance of the product offering to each of the airline's customers. So, car hire is relative or relevant to less than 5% of the audience, right?
Okay.
But when you add the other forms of transportation, like ways to get to and from the airport, you quickly get to 60% when you support bus, coach, shared shuttle, and all the other products. So our reasoning for doing it is, not really to intermediate, or it's about providing the airline customer with every single product that their customers are going to need, about relevancy, and that's about brand, and particularly now with mobile, there's less opportunities to sell, there's less space to sell, so you need all the products to go through one company, so that we call it multimodal in that way, because you're not fighting for the display with the consumer.
Would you say, Will, that's the same for rail as far as trying to integrate into the existing products out there, or is there a value of just having a direct-to-consumer play for rail?
I think it's both. I think if you take a step back to your original question, mobility is multimodal, and mobility is a reality. People have always traveled. Very few of us live in airports, and since security has increased, very few of us meet in airports anymore. So people are moving. I think the difference is that mobility is increasing in terms of more people are adventuring to more places. You know, it's no longer doing something local necessarily. You're going overseas or somewhere. So the challenge is in the seamlessness of the mobility. You know, in the past, you showed up, you went to the default thing, which was the taxi or whatever else was there. And what we're all trying to do is make mobility more seamless, make it easier for customers, travelers to be able to go wherever they want to go, whatever the modes of transport are, through whatever channels they choose to use, whether it's an online travel agency, a traditional travel agency, the supplier directly who's trying to provide more than just their primary mode of travel. And a lot of that is because customers are seeing the world in some ways as a smaller place, and they want to be able to travel without spending months of doing research and doing things, because the modes of transport appear to be very similar wherever you are in the world, whether it be a bus, a car, a local tram service, Uber, whatever it is. There's a familiarity there. They want to show up and go without having to deal with travel agents or whatever.
So is one of the premise here, is it saying that people want to plan these extended pieces of the journey before they leave, or is it in a mode now with the way the smartphone has taken off for the traveler that it's more an on-demand thing? Where do you see this fit?
I mean, I can say that about 85% of our tickets are booked within 3 days of travel. So for us, we see a lot of last-minute bookings, and for our partners, those are the most expensive trips. So we're not seeing that people are, you know, trying to find these like super cheap tickets online. We see that people look at ground travel as a way to work around their schedule, whereas last-minute flights are extremely expensive. They can take a bus or a train for a fraction of the price of a flight, and even though it's more expensive last minute, they don't really think about that. It gives them a lot more flexibility. So that has enabled a lot of last-minute trips to happen, and I think in the long term, looking at kind of ancillary revenue, enabling people to take last-minute trips. Well, not only are they buying, you know, the most expensive buses and trains, they're also buying, you know, the hotel rooms last minute. They're buying their activities last minute. So really creating these like last-minute trips is very powerful.
It seems like the traveler might not like to think that way, though, that I'm paying more because I'm waiting. But it's reality.
Yeah, but I think flexibility is really important, and it's not for a flight. You know, you might be paying $1,000 for a last-minute flight, but your worst-case scenario, paying $50 to $100 for a last-minute bus ticket, right? So it's a different scale. Yes, if you booked a month in advance, you could have gotten it for $15, but the scale is very different.
Just adding to that for the bus specifically, like historically the behavior has been just to go to the station and see the options there, because it's a small ticket. It's like $50, so you don't necessarily think about it like months in advance. But what's happening now is a lot of the bus operators are moving to dynamic pricing. So there's actually some good savings that you can have if you're booking like a week or two in advance. And we're seeing the same data that mentioned that 90% of the sales are happening within a week. But we're seeing that window kind of increase, and more bookings happening 2 weeks to a month than we saw even like a year ago.
Well, it seems like one of the ways that this discussion around multimodal has evolved, in the past, whether it's car rental or whether it's bus or whether train, kind of like feeling like the stepchildren of the industry, because everyone's always focused on the air and the hotel. Do you feel that that's changing with this ability to buy these services online and mobile?
I mean, I think, you know, we're definitely the stepchildren, because, you know, companies tend to focus on the flight funnel as their, you know, source of building demand, but they like our margins. That's all I need to say. It's a highly lucrative product that we sell. So
Just below insurance, though, right?
Well, we also sell insurance.
Oh, there you go. Okay.
What do you need? I get that.
I do think it's also a fact of reality. There are more train trips that are happening, probably definitely more car trips that are happening than flights anywhere in the world. So, and buses is there as well. So it's maybe the hard problem was airlines that they had to tackle that first, and now it's a realization that more people are familiar with these more local forms of transport.
Yeah, that's interesting. Any other
So
comments
I'd just
on
like to add to that. So something really interesting has happened in the ground transport industry over the past, let's say, like 12 years. It started initially in the US with the bus market, went from being kind of a dying industry to becoming the fastest growing form of transportation, and attracting a completely new demographic to it, which were millennials. And that came because buses started offering power outlets, Wi-Fi, and selling all their tickets online. So for some carriers, 99% of their tickets are sold online. So it attracted a completely new type of demographic that is less likely to own cars, less likely to have a driver's license. So for Wanderu, most of our user base are millennials, right? And this has consistently proven to be their preferred mode of transport, whether it's bus, whether it's train, working around their schedule, especially for shorter trips. Why go through the headache of, going to an airport and having to go through security, and it's only getting worse and worse. Flights, those aren't getting better, right? So, statistically, short-haul flights have decreased significantly over the past 10 years, while buses and trains have been only growing. And then in Europe, the deregulation of some of the markets here is now having a similar effect to what happened in the US about 10 years ago. And with other modes of transport like, BlaBlaCar and, really cheap airlines, it's created this really competitive market for multimodal travel in general, where consumer really has the ability to choose between bus, train, plane, and getting a ride or renting a car, and it's pretty competitive now, right? The prices are very competitive. So it's definitely become a lot sexier since we've started. People are now much more excited about the space, and the reason why is you have a really unique demographic, and as was mentioned, the margins are significantly better than air.
It's funny, in Ireland we use a term like face like the back of a bus to imply the opposite of sexiness.
Bring the
Take your
sexy
point.
Bring the sexy back to the buses.
Yeah.
Well, but that does bring up an interesting thought, though. There's so much effort by the airlines in particular for differentiation through services and through the way they distribute the product and the amount of information that comes across the pipe, so to speak, through NDC and things like that. Is there a similar thing happening with rail and bus and car, where there's more differentiation of the product and more effort to even do some type of ancillary on top of things? So if you want to sell Wi-Fi, if Wi-Fi is not free, maybe there's an extra fee for that. I don't know if that might be the case with train, right?
Yeah, there's definitely a growing realization there that, the past was people went to the train station, bought a ticket. There's a realization, and I think that exists in all of our industries here, that you have to be upfront with information. Consumers have an expectation of an amount of information and accessibility of information, as well as the ability to transact those pieces. And what we're seeing is all of these modes of transportation, using partners like us, are getting that information online and out there. So for all of the positives and negatives of the airline industry, they have really set the bar of what people expect to be able to do. Once they have a right to travel, they're able to get to the airport, check in online, use their mobile as a boarding pass, and other than security, walk right through to where they need to go. And we're seeing that increasingly in these ground transportation industries where that is starting to happen.
So, go ahead.
When we started the business, I was shocked by how many just brands of buses there were in the world, right? So I was traveling in Brazil, and there's like literally hundreds of bus companies. So the first step is just kind of indexing those, showing the different brands to someone who's traveling there for the first time. And there's different classes. There's Kama, semi-Kama, you're reclining, you're paying more. So just kind of sorting through all of that. And today we've built a database of about 800 different bus companies that we're sort of supporting on our website. So just showing the inventory for the first time, sort of in an aggregated way. And then the next step is kind of adding reviews and adding kind of all the detailed information around kind of amenities and classes, just having that available for users and eventually for other B2B players who want to connect into that, I think is something new that we're bringing to the market.
So, Bobby, I wanted to ask you specifically. We had one of the CEOs, I think it was from Enterprise, on stage at the Phocuswright conference a couple of years ago.
I interviewed him.
Did you interview him?
Yeah.
The question was, do you think that ride sharing is going to have any impact on your business? And he said no.
Yeah, you have to index it by the age of the answer, you know?
So that was 2 years ago, but in your core business of rental car,
Yeah.
do you see a shift that's happened because of ride sharing
So
growing?
there isn't, but there will be in 10 years' time. So it doesn't it affects the 1 to 3 day rentals in San Francisco, but it doesn't affect anything else. So it'll absolutely have an impact, a marginal impact for our business, which is primarily leisure, 7-day rentals. We don't see a threat from there, but certainly Enterprise should be seeing a very big threat because they're primarily a downtown car rental business.
Got it.
You know, so it's a different business than ours, but you know, our response to that is make sure you offer the customer every relevant product that they need. Keep the customer there with your brand, and you'll create loyalty that way. So not a threat, but yeah.
I see the demographic shift is going to cause a lot of problems in there because so many millennials don't even have driver's licenses, not just cars.
Yeah.
And that is going to impact that. And we see that in Europe and a lot of places with BlaBlaCar and then Flixbus in Germany and things like that is making significant differences to the other forms of transportation. That convenience and that access to information is transforming the industry.
Yeah, but it's an incremental, for me it's an incremental penetration, you know, it's additional product for a certain demographic, and that demographic gets older, gets children, becomes a family, ultimately needs a different product.
They need
so
a minivan.
You're absolutely right, you know, a minivan, you know, so like we're in P2P car hire, we're in ride sharing, we're in all of them, but we see very little crossover in the traffic because we see them coming in different funnels, different flight funnels or different purchasing funnels, whatever, and there's very little overlap. But the overlap only comes with the big life events like, you know, marriage, children, and so on.
Your perspective changes once you have kids. Yeah. So wanted to just talk a little bit about the corporate market also. Is there a strategy to bring bus? Obviously, train is coming to the corporate market, and you're more leisure, I know. But is there a business traveler target here with this? And then how do you go to market to get and reach those business travelers?
Yeah, I can start. So we see a lot of different product offerings that target very different types of demographics. For instance, even in the U.S. with the train product, you have the regular train through Amtrak, and then there's the Acela, which really it's a lot more expensive, but it targets those business travelers that are going, their companies are paying for it, so it doesn't really matter what it costs. We see a lot of people coming to Wanderu and purchasing both ends of those products. We also have partners that have complete luxury services like 2-in-1 seating, the equivalent of flying first class. You get served food, you get a glass of wine on your evening trips, and again, that's targeted very much towards a business traveler. So we can clearly see the trends. Business travelers tend to travel a lot more frequently. They tend to take higher, more expensive products like the Acela or like Limo Liner, which is one of our partners, or Red Coach in Florida. We have a lot of companies that have that luxury service, and you can really see the difference between kind of the leisure, last minute kind of millennial traveler versus the corporate traveler that's traveling almost every week.
And we have the millennial corporate traveler also, which is a different type of profile. Any other comments about that?
Just that the information requirements are very different on the corporate side. The consumer aspect is still there in terms of providing the upfront information, and it's something that we spend an enormous amount of time on, is making that the back channel, the back office connections and things like that, because corporations need additional information of where their staff are, as well as all the accounting side. So it's a good challenge.
Well, it seems like we always have to come back to one company when we talk about things like this, which is Google. And I know you have a lot of passion around Google, but in the context of multimodal and the fact that they are supplying multimodal, at least information, they seem to keep on going farther down the food chain for travel. There's destination information, there's all sorts of things you get just from pure Google. Do you see them as a competitor to what you do, or as that ultimately you're going to feed the information to Google as a supplier?
From our perspective, Google's an information source to the consumer public. There's lots of opinions of how they should act and where they should be and all the rest of that. I think from our perspective as a technology provider, our focus is on making sure that we have the information and the technical infrastructure to provide that information incredibly quickly to whatever that channel is. Google Flights, which there's lots of opinions on, for example, is, from a consumer perspective, fantastic. That responsiveness, that ability to interact with something and get information is really quite a great experience, and that's what we're targeting. We want to be able to provide that kind of information for our customers, the rail carriers, so that they can put that information wherever they wish to. And I think the part that everyone has to look at this is the change in technology that's coming with mobile phones, with Alexa, with the Google thingy-majiggy there, and the move from keyboards with generations younger than me to voice-activated and things like that. People are going to be asking questions and not necessarily talking about brands or specifying the product. They're going to say, I need to get somewhere, book me dinner, whatever that is. And these entities, whether it be Amazon, Google, Apple with Siri, or anything else, are going to have enormous power to be able to direct where that traffic is going. And so you're going to see this change where the edge is owned by these organizations, and there's going to be those original providers with the money to put into their brands, hopefully, and then very few others that will have the ability to get their brands out there. And I think that changing marketplace is going to drive an enormous amount of change, which we'll be talking about for the next 10 years at Phocuswright.
Norm, we have a question from the audience.
Question from the audience.
Hi, Don Birch. A question regarding autonomous vehicles. How will the arrival of autonomous vehicle change your marketplaces?
Self-driving cars.
Railway companies like to claim that they have the original self-driving vehicle.
Well, I'm very excited about autonomous. I think it's a major opportunity for everyone. I just don't know where the opportunity lies. I think again, it's Google. I think Google are years ahead there with autonomy, and they're just going to kill it. But funnily enough, doing car hire, I'd still see that as a terrific opportunity because we have the customer base. So whatever product, whatever the customer needs, ultimately we can deliver. We may not own it, but we can get to the customer. So probably generally positive for the space.
Yeah, I think autonomous buses are becoming a reality as well.
Yep.
Even though it might be a scary concept for a few people when they think about it initially, but from the operator's point of view, two of their main expenses are the driver and the gas. And if you can eliminate with electric vehicles that have no drivers, then there's opportunity for additional margin for them and to keep operating more and more routes that way.
Yeah,
So just to add to that, so one of the biggest challenges that our partners are seeing from the bus side is not just the expensive drivers, but the shortage of drivers. So going back to the next generations, millennials, Gen Z, whatever, less of them want to be bus drivers, right? So the challenge is a lot of the bus drivers are now retiring, and companies are scrambling because they have the buses, but they have nobody to drive them, right? So I think there's a dual opportunity there for self-driving buses. Is one, you solve the driver shortage problem, which is a major problem in the space right now, and two, you can use the data that exists in the marketplace to create basically an on-demand model for bus travel where you don't need to, if you have the vehicles, you just tell them where to go.
It's far more efficient as well. You can have smaller,
Yeah.
more vehicles, no unions, no cost to the driver. It's just far better. So more
And they
room
can
for
drive
margin.
24 hours, right?
Exactly,
Unlike
yes. So
drivers.
your capital cost is less, your operational cost is less, so
Flexible
consumer
routing.
wins.
Yep.
Exactly, it's just a million times better. Would you put your kids in a car and send them to school on their own? I would.
Listen, I probably trust the vehicle more than I trust most drivers,
Yeah.
most humans.
Yeah,
So
it's true. There's a vision I've seen. I live in the Bay Area, in San Francisco Bay Area, of actually having so much autonomy in vehicles, both buses and automobiles, that suddenly the parking issue disappears.
Yeah.
'Cause right now, it's awful if you want to park in the city.
Traffic
so.
too. There's video recently that I saw where a traffic jam, so loads of cars going around in a circle, and when humans drive them, just 20 cars create traffic jams and they end up in gridlock. And you introduce one autonomous car into those 20 cars, just one autonomous car, and the way it drives influences the rest of them, so there's no traffic jam. Just one car out of 20 pretty much gets rid of traffic jams.
So we're almost at the end here, which went very fast. I just wanted to go through the panel. What type of advice do you have for the audience, those that are tour operators or OTAs or traditional travel agents or suppliers? What should they be thinking about as far as multimodal? Do you think it's almost like a necessary aspect of their business? It's an add-on, it's an opportunity for revenue. What's your view of this from their perspective? What would be the takeaway for them?
Provide every relevant product to your customer.
I think it's a clear opportunity for revenue. We talked about Google being sort of an early leader in multimodal search engine. It wasn't the OTAs, the large OTAs, but now I think they have to come to a realization that it's an amazing way to acquire a lot of users and then potentially cross-sell, attach, upsell other products like hotel and others.
If you don't solve the customer experience problem, somebody else will.
Okay.
Yep. I would add to that ignoring, this industry has been ignored for a very long time, right? But the numbers tell a completely different story. You have, these modes of transport are growing faster than any other mode of transport. You see the demographic shift to this mode of transport, and if you don't provide the experience, as you said, but also the products that customers want, those customers are going to go elsewhere. So in order to attract the millennial demographic, in order to attract future generations, you need to be able to offer them the things that they're looking for, and then figure out how to sell them other things while they're there as well.
Fantastic. Well, I want to thank our panelists, Bobby, LP, Will, and Polina, and thank you, the audience, for your attention and participation. Thank you.
Thank you.